I told what to, okay, we go.
This is Defacto Review, where we run down the top news from the previous week, and then we debate what happens next. Hi, I'm Terrence Edwards, and with us tonight is our returned host, Jurgle Defacto. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Good evening. We are ready now to go for this last week. Major events happened in the country, and we will share with you our independent points on those things.
Yeah, I gotta say, you missed some big news while you were out.
Okay, I was following every day the country.
I'm sure you were. It's hard not to notice. Hard not to take notice.
So let's go one by one.
Sure. We begin our evening with the budget cuts. Cuts to social welfare programs have been proposed with an amendment from the Jargle-Tolga-Erdenbach government for the 2016 budget. The new budget projects a $4.4 billion Tugrik deficit for the year, with about a quarter less earnings than originally projected, and an 18.5% cut in expenditures. The cuts include the suspensions of all allowances to university students of about 70,200 Tugrik, and 40% of recipients of the universal children allowances of 20,000 Tugrik ahead have been cut. So about 60% of all children would receive that rather than the universal, everyone. So these are a lot of budget cuts for Mongolians to take in. Do you think they're prepared to make these sacrifices?
Not sure. Why? Because the action they're going to take, we can divide into two things. One is state and budget. The other is political party, and then the election promises. So let's go one by one.
Okay.
Just to explain why the people will not be happy. In Mongolia, the size of the state is large.
Yes.
And we talk about 180,000 people for 3 million, and we have 1 million.
It's a lot of personnel.
1 million or so labor, and then we have about 20% public officers in normal language. But we call it state offices, though it is not by its essence, not a state, but it's public offices. But many of them, of course, of police, teachers who are paid on the payroll of the budget. They will decrease it, and they are cutting salaries for a lot higher ranking officials, etc. And now if Mongolian public officer is fired or any reason fired, then usually that person is taking for 6 months salary, 6 months salary, a salary amount equivalent of for 6 months, and it is cut to 3 months, for example. There will not be any more payment for students, 70,000 per month. It is not anymore. And also, there is an issue of children, money for every children. They have category of 16 classes or 16 groups of population by income. First 10 is only to be paid children's money. Many families dependent on that money. So there are substantial changes going to happen in terms of budget expenditure, and mostly based on their party political promises, but unfortunately, actually it's completely opposite what they have promised before the election.
Okay, so they're already reversing.
Very much so. So that's the first reasons I just want to
But they did say they wanted to get the budget in order. That was part of their promise as well.
Well, the problem is they cannot do it because the budget was so much blown up, so much popular, and there is a lot of irresponsibility, inaccountability in the budget. And we don't have this mechanism in our government system where we can have monitoring, check and balance. That is very badly existing in this country. You know why? And that's the reason why they are going to do all these changes. The reason is corruption.
Yeah. Corruption
because these political parties, when they don't disclose where they are taking so much money, how much they are being paid by people, officials who is taking high-ranking positions afterwards, And again, it's a fractions issue among fights among fractions inside of this political party as well, like the previous one. So, you know, when you don't have the source cut, and then you want to have the cosmetic changes, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, even you cut every salaries, we will not go out from a crisis, because we need to fix the holes of the base and the basket, and once the big hole is there, you cannot just fix the budget.
Yeah, it's like putting, if you have a giant hole in your wall and just putting the wallpaper over it.
That's what's happening in the country. So unfortunately, the politicians do not address that holes,
Yeah.
which has to do with them and with the previous party as well. So that's why I think the crisis is something that we cannot go out very fast. That's we should admit.
One thing I want to bring up, like so much in government, it seems to be overly complicated, and that's the retirement age. It seems that it will be raised in some cases and lowered in some. Could you give us a rundown here?
Well, in Mongolia, women are retired at the age of 55, men at the age of 60.
Okay, so
now their talk is
difference.
they want to increase it, extend it longer. You go to retirement later. And also another motion that been proposed by government to parliament is to give earlier, to get the herdsmen go to pension earlier. Very interesting phenomena, because herdsmen don't pay that pension, all this money, because they are regarded having no salary, permanent salary. That's the problem. So this is still discussions. I don't know what will be the final decisions, but the government wants to keep that payment for pension longer, staying in the government. But it's just one of the many cosmetic things they want to do. And as we have talked, without that covering and filling the hole, we cannot get the budget fixed.
Okay, moving on. Seems there's more pain to come with the economic crisis as the parliament proposes to increase taxes. Tax hikes are expected to follow, with austerity measures being brought in by the Jargotolga-Erdenbach government. The income tax would be set at 9.5% for anyone under 30 million tugriks a year income. Anyone over that will be paying 25% on their income. They also proposed is a tax on savings in banks. So, are these taxes affordable to the average Mongolian, what we're looking at?
Well, the base of tax in the country is very small. 90% of all tax revenues are coming only from 5% of the companies.
Okay.
So it is not that substantial. But however, increasing tax for particular social insurance, because the owner of the company is paying taxes for the employees. And the employees, in cases they don't know even how much they owe, almost 35% of their salary goes to the state. They don't understand, they don't know.
Yeah.
So they just account what the cash they receive home, they bring home, okay? So if they will increase another 9–10% that social insurance, which is, for example, 21%, 10% is paid by the on behalf of the employer. Employer is paying for employee, and 10% additional also. So 21% from the salary of the guy goes to the budget.
Okay.
Now they want to eat it 30%.
Okay.
I mean 25%. 5% increase at 26%. But 26%, 20% is already very high. It's very expensive to hire in Mongolia somebody. Now it's increasing another 5%. I certainly agree. I think that many people will now even more fire. So firing is not the way to go out from crisis.
Well, you got one problem to another, then you have an employment crisis.
We have more social tension because now true employment rate is way more than the government is talking about, because they don't estimate, for example, people working in a non-full market.
Yeah.
Those regarded employee. They are not actually. It depends on the everyday things. And so many people are regarding themselves like having a job. Actually, they don't. It is not permanent income. So as any developing country, a lot of things need to fix. And the taxes, like in developed countries where everybody is personally paying their own income taxes and social insurance, then it is not working in Mongolia. Now the remaining is cutting exactly the only channel that we had somehow, we're controlling in a way real economy from gray economy. Now we will have more black market, gray economy more.
So you're saying with the tax hikes, it's going to send people underground. We just had a tax amnesty last year to try and clear up arrears.
Yeah,
and we'll have more coming along the way.
At this time of crisis like this,
yeah,
it's rather an issue of decreasing even taxes so that you have more revenue. The statistics say that when you increase taxes, you get less. In Georgia, where I was recently, a couple of weeks ago, Georgia decreased its taxes from 20 to 6. But tax revenue become 6 times more during 6 years. So people tend to deal with lower taxes better. So we have increased the tax bases more, which is a good revenue for the state. But the government, as any government of a democratically elected country, they look for only 4 years. So they don't want to have the budget, having a big deficit like right now. Without fixing that corruption, as we have talked, the money, the whole, we cannot have a success, I think, in this. But these people cannot combat corruption themselves because it's kind of their oxygen. They cannot cut their oxygen. This political party, the previous one. So that's an unfortunate situation in the country.
So for everyone making less than 30 million tugriks a year, their tax will be 9.5%. Is that an increase or?
Increase.
It's an increase.
Yes. Now it's 10%, right?
10%, okay.
Yes, and they will eventually increase to another 5% to 10% more. There will be 25%.
Okay. That's over 30 million tugrik.
Yeah, which is over. Now, for example.
So below that, what is the tax rate?
As a current one, and then above that, 30. If you consider the cost of the country, that the middle class would have this 2.5 million tugriks per month, which is 30 million tugriks per year. So I think people now, a lot of people will pay more from their revenues, incomes now.
So we're looking at tax hikes across the board then?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a typical austerity measure, often enforced by the IMF when they give crisis payment.
Well, IMF is a good scapegoat because
of
you
course.
Can explain everything what's happening bad. It's with the IMF. That's why all around the world they are fighting against the IMF.
Well,
but
yeah,
in fact,
yeah.
the government is doing something that they cannot do themselves directly under the name of IMF. What IMF demands is just fiscal discipline. Just you do as much as you earn. You cannot do all the time on borrowing, which this country, in particular, previous government was doing in an astronomical size. 2012, from December, we started to borrow. That's almost all the way up to $6.5 billion for $10 billion economy, which is way high. And the paradox is now this government, which made not that decisions, but it is to be in the charge of payment. But whether it can do or not, will the country announce default? It's still a matter of time.
Well, whether or not it results in default, that's at no fault of the people of Mongolia. What I mean to bring up is, this is a typical austerity measure taken often with the IMF, whether or not in this case it is. It does often create that unrest. It does force people to the streets to go out and protest.
Of course, because
the economy, people's incomes are falling, and then they're being asked to pay more on top of it. It's that double-sided sword.
This time Mongolians will be very unhappy and angry because we have seen so many corruption cases going silently or benign. I don't know what's happening. And it's also because these two political parties running the country for last how many years, they are so corrupt, and they are undercurrent. They're also interconnected. I don't think they will be fighting until the end, the big corruption cases. And until if they don't find with these cases where the millions of dollars were misused and taken or stolen, people will not be happy. They will say that what happens?
Yeah.
Why we have to pay money that you have stolen? Why we have to pay money for your luxury?
And it's a tough picture to look at when you're paying more and you're at the bottom of the social class, and you see politicians and millionaires very unaffected.
On the other hand, in a normal tax system, 10% of rich person is way more than 10% of the poor person. So in that sense, this economic efficiency is there, because if you tax completely that rich person, who will be investing? Not poor people.
Of course.
So these rich people are moving the economy. Only issue is they are also paying bribes to the politicians. As a result, under his name, politicians are becoming rich in the corrupt country like Mongolia.
But I do think a progressive tax is a strong way to go.
Well, this is big questions around that, but in general feeling, or in particular Europe's, France, for example, they, of course, overarching it. I mean, now what, every high-income French people are leaving the country.
Yeah.
So there are certain things where you have the most optimum point, which can be different in Mongolia. But overall, we need more private sector investment into economy than the foreign investment even. Because a foreign investment comes when the domestic investments believe. If the domestic investment don't believe, then why the foreigners should believe in the country? Yeah. So that's my argument, that economy should be in such a way that a private person invest into business money, feel comfortable. Of course, he's taking his risks, but not such a risk like a tax hike. That's really risk, isn't it? So that through increasing tax, you cut the money coming to the real economy. That's what everybody should know before they make decisions on that issue.
There is that potential backlash. We're going to move on. It's not just people's incomes and taxes that are being affected by this economic crisis. The statements made by the finance minister some weeks ago has also had an effect on Mongolia's sovereign credit rating. Two of the world's top credit raters have downgraded Mongolia's sovereign rating, with Standard & Poor's lowering Mongolia rating a notch from B to B-, while Moody's has lowered its rating from B2 to B3. Credit raters have cited the budget cuts in spending, the lack of significant rebound in foreign investment, and falling exports as the reason for their downgrades. Credit ratings have a direct effect on the prices of bonds in the country, as well as commercial banks' ratings, since raters often won't rate a bank any at the same or any higher than the central bank's rating or the sovereign rating. So Mongolia has more than $6 billion in direct debt and guaranteed debt. How can you explain how a downgrade of Mongolia's credit rating will affect the existing debt and then any debt Mongolia plan to issue further down the line?
Of course, like any country with this sort of decrease or downgrading by these major companies, it will not be good for the investment. Investment comes to the country where you trust. It's a matter of how much are you trusted. Looks like we are trusted very less and less. Why? It's expressed our level of trust in Mongolians are expressed in the bond interest rate, which is now over 10%.
Okay, yeah.
3 years ago, it was about 4.5%. Remember, Chinggis bond was about 4.5% a year rate. Now, this sort of bond now being sold over 10%.
Yeah, it was doing better than Portugal at the time.
Yes, much better. And now it's much worse probably because 10%, if it is over 10%, it will already causing the certain warnings. And that's why they are downgrading Mongolia. So now the issue is, can Mongolia increase that trust, that ranking by these companies' ratings? It will be done only if the state is disciplined. We have if we have a less state budget deficit, we have more efficiency in the economy, which I don't see much, because it's too much dependent on mineral, and the mineral price goes down, the economy goes down, and yet because it's corrupt governance, the distribution of income was so unequal. Because I understand somebody found coal, gold, they will have a life, it's a good life, I understand. But through this taxing system, the things should go to, people feel that revenue from that mining, which was not very much case in the country. Not everybody was feeling, and the poverty level is 21% still. And yet we now have to pay a lot of money. From where? Is every project we made on this bond, with this bond, is efficient? Are they going to pay that interest rate on time? If they are not going to pay on time, why? And how, in which way that project was started, financed from the bond? That's something that nobody is reporting properly here. If they do report properly, I think many people, including this political party people, will be involved in this distribution of these all bonds that for which we all pay at the end through all these tax hikes. So that's the problem. The more Mongolians will understand that, and now it is the case, people will be truly demanding from these people who is running the country true transparency. Where are those money? How are they spending? Are they efficient, these loans? If not, why? How many percent some of these decision makers got from the tender? That's some criminal issues that they should go after. But I'm sure they will not go, because these are a part of those whole systems. So what I'm saying is corruption is so deep that these political parties cannot change, because this is the way of their living, their oxygen. Will they cut their own oxygen? So that's the question.
When it comes to Mongolia's debt, there's kind of two roads they can take. There's a refinancing of its debt. The other is negotiating what they call a haircut, where Mongolia actually pays less than what it originally promised to. Mongolia has to pay development bank bonds next year. And then in 2018, they start with Chinggis bonds. What happens if it's that worst case scenario and Mongolia has to do the quote unquote haircut?
Not sure how successfully we will agree that haircut agreement. It's basically, you're talking about the restructuring of our foreign debt.
Yeah.
They should have a lot of supporter of A-grade, triple A-grade supporters on that restructuring. They will not support the country until they have very good new structure of the governance system and reporting system, accountability. That's what we are missing. And that's why people who have donated the largest amount of money are still getting big positions. That's the bad symbol, bad very sign. Public positions, public jobs, services to be based on merit, not based on the money you have. If it is the case, then you never end up with corruption, because the source is there. The bucket is still with whole. So, that's something I think all Mongolians should understand, and we slowly understanding. And if the foreign debt coming so big and we don't pay, and then the allot budget is not support budget is not supporting salaries of people who dependent on budget, then that's very bad. That's kind of instability.
All right, I want to close with one last question. The thing on everyone's mind is Mongolia's so-called mega projects. These are projects that are so large, they have a tremendous impact on the economy. I think last year in May 2015, everyone saw the deal with Oil Toga, and they raised up their hands and they said, our problems are solved. Obviously, that did not occur. We are going forward with the phase 2. It's a multi-billion-dollar project, as much as $6 billion. It hasn't been enough up until now, but payment towards the cost of that project has just begun. Can you name a few other projects that will be crucial to whether Mongolia can keep its head above water over the next couple of years?
Well, the very motion that the bigger the project is, the better for the economy is. At this motion in Mongolia, in such system as such today, it's a good question, because, for example, take a power station number 5. It's a huge project, $570 million.
Been talked about for decades.
Maybe we are coming now, I think, in the middle of second decade now.
Yeah.
And this is a good case where political interests of more than 4 years projects cannot be solved in this country because this democratic power changes.
And it's more than economy on the line, it's people's lights. It's our lights in the studio.
I think on the other side, particular projects like, for example, making power stations close to the mine and sell their power to Chinese grade, because we soon, a couple of them is in particular this Tawan Tolwa power station is made.
Also been proposed for South Gobi Resources mine.
Yes, and then 2, 3, we have in line, I think, in 5 or so stations, power stations. At least with 2 of them working, none of them have started even building, but if these 2 of them are working, then Mongolia will be energy sufficient. Then the remaining, the surplus, should be sold to Chinese surplus network. Now, hopefully that agreement is being made. So everything will depend on China, whether China will buy or not. And even including this Tawan Tolga railway project.
Yeah, crucial.
If China doesn't buy, then who will pay for this date that we will build up these stations, railways, but we keep paying the interest rate if nobody is buying on the other end. So that's the situation.
All right, well, we'll close on that note.
Okay, thank you very much. We will, with Terence, try every Sunday night to go with the major economic and political issues in the country happening a week before. And we do it especially in English for non-Mongolian speakers, so that you have some independent views on what's going on in the country. And we do it because, first, we are the free citizens of free countries. Secondly, this is a democratic country at the end, and we want know what's going on in the Mongolian society from independent sources. Thank you very much. And
of course, if you missed the original broadcast, you can catch us on our Jurgil's YouTube page, Jurgil Defacto.com
from tomorrow.
Yeah. So that's our program for the evening. We hope our briefings give you a heads up when you get to work on Monday for the rest of the week. Thank you. Good night, Olambatar.
Have a great evening. Thank you.